Hi, Gloria Lybecker here with Healing You. Have you ever been knocked off balance by the unexpected? I sure have. Let me tell you a story that happened a few years back. I remember when my son Rylan, he came tearing into the house. His eyes were wide and he was breathless. And I noticed that his shirt and his pants were wet in spots. I'm like, what's going on? Are you okay? And he crouched as he sank to the floor. And his words just tumbled out. He's like, I was just playing with my squirt gun and I took it over to Jim's and he was watering his plants and I squirted him. And he said, you might not want to do that, or something like that. And then he sprayed me with the hose. It was really hard, and I didn't call him an effer, but I flipped him off. And then I'm scared that he hates me, and Dad saw everything that happened, and he said, I'm going to have to go back and make a repair before we can leave. Well, I said to him, I said, well, where is your dad? He saw all this, and then what all happened? I was just trying to make sense of it, because it was really unexpected. And I remember as Rylan was just crashing that I felt such a sense of dismay, heaviness in my body. I wanted to soothe and I wanted to comfort him rather than pelting him with more questions, trying to understand what had happened. So what I did was I shifted right. And I made some empathy guesses for him. I said something like, I'm hearing how unexpected this whole thing was for you and how you're feeling and wanting to be sure that you're safe and you need to know you matter. I reached out and I used touch to rub his back really gently. And I could feel his body beginning to relax underneath my touch. And then just as suddenly, as my hand was on him, I felt his body as it tensed up. It went taut. And I could hear then my husband coming into the house downstairs. So Rylan scampered off to the other room. As my husband came in, I asked him how he was doing. And he said that he was really worried about Rylan and asked me if Rylan had said what had happened. So I shared what Rylan had shared. And he's like, yeah, Rylan, he likes to play and squirt others with water, but he doesn't seem to think about or understand he doesn't think what might happen when he squirts water on someone and they're not expecting it, that he might get squirted back. And he doesn't like to get wet unless he's planning to get wet already. So when he got wet, he freaked out and he flipped the neighbor off and he ran home. Then he's like, what a great way to start off with our new neighbors. So I told him we had to go over and talk to him and make repairs before we leave. And he couldn't hear that either. I gave my husband a big hug. And I acknowledged that, yes, it's tough getting to know new neighbors. And then I made a guess for him too. It's like, are you really worried about Rylan? And he gets so scared. And you just need to know that he's going to be safe and that he has support in our world. And I could see my husband's body relax as I made that guess. A little later, the doorbell rang. And Rylan looked out the window to see who it was. And he's like, oh, it's Jim. Tell him I'm asleep. And he curled down and pretended to be asleep. Well, I opened the door and I welcomed our neighbor in. And as he took off his hat, he said, I think I might have upset and frightened Rylan. And I wanted to see how he's doing. And I said, well, Rylan did tell us what happened. And he was going to come over with his dad and see how you were doing before they left for some vacation time. Well, the neighbor was so relational. He's like, well, that ought to be a fun time for him. Is he around here somewhere? So Rylan slowly stood up and got off the couch. And he rocked nervously back and forth. And he fidgeted with his hands together. When Jim saw him, he said, oh, there he is. Hi, Rylan. How you doing, man? And he stretched out his hand to Rylan with a really friendly smile. So Rylan greeted his handshake with a nervous smile and said, I'm doing okay. And the neighbor shared his confusion. And he said, I'm feeling a little confusion, some worry. He used a really slow and calm voice when he replied. He said, because when you're at my place playing with your squirt gun, I played back with a little water from my hose. And then you waved some kind of motions with your hand at me and ran off. I went in and I talked with my wife about it. And we thought that maybe getting wet is one of your sensory things. So I came over to ask to see if you're all right. Is getting wet a sensory thing for you? Rylan was still fidgeting and rocking. He's like, well, kind of. And the neighbor apologized. He said, I'm really sorry, buddy. I didn't know that. Our grandson, he has some sensory issues too, but he uses his words instead of his hands, so I can understand what he needs better. And then Rylan was like, oh, you don't know sign language? And the neighbor smiled and said, no, I don't. So if you were willing to use your words, it would really help me out to respond in the moment much better. Would you do that for me? Then Rylan was honest. He felt much safer with this conversation. He said, well, sometimes using my words hard for me. So my husband, he came alongside Rylan and he explained. He said, well, Rylan has a hard time using his words with others, and that's just something that's not really available to him when he's upset. In fact, it's most likely better for him to calm down before he uses his words when he's upset. So Jim's like, oh, that's really good to know, because we really care about you, Rylan, and we want to support you. And I need support too. So can we work on this together? Will that be okay with you? And Rylan said, sure, okay. I put my arms around Rylan's shoulders and I gave him a squeeze. And I thanked Jim for taking the time to come over and to make sure that our son was okay. And I said that we really appreciated his compassionate understanding. And he was like, well, not a problem. We want to be good neighbors, so you be sure to let me know if there's anything you need while they're gone. And in that moment, I felt this flash of welcoming surprise, and it spread throughout my whole body because I realized that we had neighbors that really do care and that they're actively building relationships with us. Now I want to reflect a little bit on how this actually mapped out for my son. When he was met with the unexpected, his internal alarm system, remember the brain in the palm of the hand, it knocked him off balance. And he was able to do what he needed to calm himself down. He ran home, he curled up, and he breathed really deep. He also had some impulse control because he refrained from yelling and screaming and cussing. That was really big for him at that time. So having this experience with our new neighbor was a gift in and of itself. Our neighbor modeled how a caring and compassionate person takes responsibility to make repairs in relationships with others. He made an observation about what had happened. He named his confusion, and he checked in with the other person to hear what their experience was. And after understanding each other's experience, they made an agreement to support one another and to stay in relationship. As I witnessed my son developing his own sense of self in the world, I found myself inspired to take action for what I want in my own life, while simultaneously I was feeling very humbled just by how hard the work is to be able to stay in relationship, because that is the bedrock of learning who we are as human beings. If you're interested to learn more about how to map your life experiences, check out my introduction to the Healing You method at my website at www.healingyousanctuary.com. And thanks for being on this journey with me today. Healing You.